Hello, podcast listeners. This is your host with the most. We're going to start out talking about a famous poem called The Dash. We're going to fill in about John Candy's life. We're going to talk about patience and baby bunnies. We cover a lot of ground on this episode of JJ Meets World. So fill up the tank, get ready, put on your best driving gloves, and enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World. And by the way, if you'd like to help support our podcast, visit jjmeetsworld.com where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some killer swag at our merch shop, or click the link to Apple Podcast and give us a 5-star review.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
Tucker, I went to a funeral yesterday. Went to a funeral of the mother of a previous guest on JJ Meets World, and I rarely attend funerals by myself, but this one I did because Jill was busy, and it was like an hour away from home, and so I assumed I was going to see some other people from work. I wasn't able to make it to the wake that was the night before, and I started so here's some thoughts from this funeral that I walked away with. Number one, Brian Poiser, who also has been on JJ Meets World, was the piano accompaniment as well as did the prelude music. And I'm going to tell you the prelude music he played because it rocked my world. It was awesome. So these are piano, softer versions of... Okay, hold on. Wait. I got to pick it up because it's so good.
Were you recording this at the funeral? Are you about to play?
No.
For us here?
I wrote down each track.
Hey, I expected that you were going to hold your phone up and be like, this was it. I started recording it.
No. I wrote down each track. Okay. He started with Desperado.
Okay.
A piano version of Desperado is primo, by the way. Here Comes the Sun, Let It Be, Rainbow Connection, Tiny Dancer, and then there was some more religious offerings.
So,
and I was
so far we've got, was it Bryan Adams did Desperado?
No, that's Don Henley with the Eagles.
There you go. Thank you.
Desperado.
Beatles. We've got Muppets. Mm-hmm. We've got
Elton John.
Elton John. Nice.
Yeah. And so I talked to Brian afterwards, and he said, yeah, when I talked to Madison, he gave me some of her favorite, pop tunes. And so I incorporated them in. And I'm like, they sound great. Which, if you've never gone on Spotify and gone down the rabbit hole of almost every major recording artist, somebody has done a lullaby album of their songs. Mm-hmm. And they're nice to listen to in the background. Like, there's an Elton John lullaby album that is out of this world.
Yeah, I dig those a lot. I've listened to the Coldplay ones a couple of times.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. It almost sounds like it's being played on like a child's piano, like a toy piano. No, I dig it.
It's like that tinkling noise, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that's the best way I can say to describe it.
Well, and I would guess that would be kind of a natural progression, because I think a lot of older, songs would have been originated as nursery rhymes or something, or as a song on a record. I like that you can now play that and you have that option. Why do that instead, versus like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star?
Yeah,
over and over
100%.
Again. Not shitting on Twinkle Twinkle. But, after the third play, so it's like, okay, I'm not really feeling the same thing I was feeling the first time.
I believe Twinkle Twinkle was a song first, but then we adopted that melody for the ABCs. And same with Ba Ba. Yeah, Ba Ba Black Sheep. Ba Ba Black Sheep, have you any wool? Twinkle, twinkle, little star.
And it probably, even earlier than that, started as some, weird war chant.
Right, exactly. Like
their heads will cut
them.
off. We'll burn their villages.
Take their gold. Everything comes back to and they're probably Vikings, right? It probably goes back to Viking chants. The pastor read a poem, and I want to just put it out there. It's pretty quick. It's called The Dash by Linda Ellis. Have you ever heard this poem before? Yeah. And it's not uncommon, especially at funerals, but for whatever reason yesterday it really spoke to me. And so the dash, for those of you who've never heard it, goes like this. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of birth and spoke of the following date with tears, but he said what mattered most was what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time they spent alive on earth, and now only those who love them know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that can still be rearranged. To be less quick to anger and show appreciation more and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering that this special dash might only last a little while. So when your eulogy is being read with your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about how you lived your dash? So when I hear that, and maybe it's just because, like, I mean, I'm 40, so they could, a lot of times they call that midlife, but my dad didn't live past 51. My grandfather on my dad's side didn't live past 50. Alzheimer's took my grandmother and grandfather on my mom's side. My mom got to 60, but barely, so did my mom get to 60? Born in 1950. No, she didn't. She got to 58.
Oh,
so she didn't even make it to 60.
Yep.
And so I think, for whatever reason, like hearing that poem yesterday really made me think about, like, okay, what's my dash? Because I definitely I put a lot of time and effort into my job and my work, and it's very gratifying in a lot of ways. But I wonder, is that the thing I want the most? I'm also the era where, like, I mowed my lawn and there went an hour and a half of my life the other day.
Yeah.
And I realized that, the problem is that I mow the lawn, but then I don't go sit in the lawn.
Right.
I just mow it because that's what society tells me I have to do. Same with the city of Fargo.
You understand that there is an obligation, right? And that even though you can let it grow for a while before the city's going to get involved with you, there's that piece of your mind that goes, how many people drive by and judge my lawn, right? Or say like, oh, and consider me lazy or whatever. They might be right. I have learned, at least with the lawn I have, and maybe just because it's so small it works, to actually really enjoy mowing the lawn. Because it's a break from doing what I'm usually doing, which is being in front of a computer.
Yeah.
It's just so kind of weird to say. And actually, my hobbies lately have all been centered around not using a computer, not like connecting to the communication. And things like mowing the lawn can be nice. It can be really nice to pour my morning coffee and go out into my backyard and pick up sticks real slow.
Yeah.
Just sip coffee, listen to the birds. Oh, let me get the sticks out of the way, make a little pile over here. Your phone isn't going off. You don't have your boss isn't yelling at you for something. Your spouse isn't, giving you passive aggressive treatment for a moment. You're just standing in your yard.
Yeah. And it's deeper than just like, it's a connection to nature. It is allowing yourself to slow down for that minute. It's the reason why I reset my computer once a week. Like I do like a reset power cycle on it.
Sure.
Because I always think, well, you need to rest at some point, computer. Even if you're going to just turn yourself back on, but you need to shut down and come back up. It's the reason why if I can spend 5 extra minutes in bed before I get up for the day and I get whatever, if it's just me and my thoughts, if I write something down, I try not to do the thing where I just sit on my phone the whole time, because does your phone send you those like, hey, this last week you spent an average of blank hours per day on your phone, which is up or down compared to the last week?
I have that turned off because I don't want to see those numbers.
I
don't want to see something that's like, you ate this many calories from McDonald's this week. I don't want to know that number.
be like, hey, sorry, iPhone. They're like, listen, I want you to upgrade eventually, so please stay alive. But I started thinking about, okay, so what are those things in my dash I don't have kids yet, right? And that, of course, is a huge piece of your dash. Like, what do you leave for future generations? And I was trying to think of like, have I made the world a better place that gets remembered more than just, I watched Uncle Buck yesterday and it made me think of JJ. Like, I'm listening to a book right now called The Wild and Crazy Guys, and it's about the era of the early 80s and the comedies and comedians who came out of that era.
Who's narrating that?
It's narrated by Curtis Armstrong, who played Booger in the Revenge of the Nerds movies.
Nice.
So he's like a part of it. And so he's like acting it out, which is really great.
Like burp between chapters? Like
I wish. But he's doing such a good job with it that I really just, I can't get enough of it. And one of the things they talk about John Candy, right? And they talk about how he had the nickname Johnny Toronto because one day he was smoking a cigarette and he threw it on the ground and he goes, one day I'm going to own this town. And Joe Flaherty is like, you're Johnny Toronto, man. Johnny Toronto. But they talked about how he loved to host people at his house. And John Candy was a night owl, a guy who like would stay up all night drinking rum and cokes, cook this gigantic feast of a breakfast for his family, and then go to sleep afterwards. Like once everyone went to school, like he just loved to be up at night and stuff. And so he and I don't share all the same vices. Like for him, you know, drinking was like a big thing. Like he loved it, and he never drank to excess. He wasn't an alcoholic, but he was one of those guys who like really liked the atmosphere of people having cocktails and being together.
Yeah. Kind of like, that's kind of a Bert Kreischer.
It very much
that would be something that those two had in common.
I think Bert and John Candy have a lot of the same cloth in their tapestry. They told a story, though, about a very special Canadian Thanksgiving where they were making SCTV and he invited the whole cast over to his house after they had to do some TV appearance to have Thanksgiving dinner. And when he'd have just regular parties, if he didn't feel like cooking for people, he'd order from restaurants that didn't deliver, and like 5 or 6 restaurants. And he'd be like, this is John Candy. And they would just, the manager essentially would drive it over himself, right? And you'd like have all of this food, like it'd be a feast because he didn't want to like choose, I want ribs, but I also really want these hush puppies, and I also really want, you know, this chocolate cake, and they all come from different places. And so he would have loved Grubhub. He would have been all about that world. So this Thanksgiving, they go out and they do their appearance, and afterwards they all go over to the Candy household, and he's getting ready to make this big feast, right? And that morning he had taken the turkey out of the freezer and put it in the fridge. Well, it takes several days to thaw a turkey. If you know, like they say, like if you're planning on cooking a turkey on Thursday and it's fully frozen and it's like a 20-pound bird, you need to take it out on Saturday beforehand. So John brought the turkey to the upstairs bathroom and put it in the shower and just put the hot water on it until they ran out of hot water, like thawing it out. And Eugene Levy was talking about how like they ate all this snack food, and they're like, "Oh, I guess we'll just have a snack food dinner." And John's like, "No, we're making all this other stuff." And he goes, "They didn't end up eating a full Thanksgiving meal until 2:00 in the morning." So it's 2 a.m.
He got it. He thought and was able to.
He thought and it was able. And that's the thing is like cooking a turkey too. You're talking about 4 hours.
Yeah.
So let's say they get to this guy's house by 3:00 in the afternoon. You expect like someone had already put the turkey in earlier that day to make it happen. And so they eat this thing at 2 a.m. And Eugene Levy talks about how like, God, we were already full of snack food. We were already full because we've been drinking all day. We're tired. You know, we have to work the next day, and we're still there until 2 a.m. And he said, at the time, you don't realize it, but it was the best Thanksgiving I've ever had. And it was just people around laughing, and like that's what John loved, right? Mm-hmm. And people have stories about how if you were a PA or like an assistant on SCTV, how like part of your initiation would be John would need to run an errand real quick, and so you'd go with him, and he essentially would kidnap you for a whole day. He always had these really big cars, and he'd drive it in front, and he goes, I gotta pick something up from a guy in here, and he'd go into a bar, and an hour later you'd walk in there, and there he'd be with like everyone at the bar, and they'd be singing a song, and he'd be like, oh yeah, I was wondering if you were ever gonna come in, and they'd like, no, I got, but now I gotta go and stop at this other place. And so 10 hours can go by of you essentially being taken hostage by the sweetest, gentlest, funniest guy ever.
If you were that level wealthy and famous, do you think that's how you'd be living? Minus obviously the booze and cigarettes. I know, because that's just not your jam.
100%. What I would love is every time I walk in the room, somebody to think, oh, the good times are ready to roll.
Well, and like a person who's at that point or at that level in a career, they are kind of like a nation state, right? They walk in and everything else kind of, gives them space. And through just through the sheer fact of being John Candy, right, at that moment means, yeah, I'll get away with things, or I could probably make things happen really, really easy. Like just getting the whole bar on my side because I can, pay for everything and create the time I want.
And I think like the key to John Candy is that he could pay for everything, and I think he did on a regular basis, but that wasn't what people remember from that night, right? Yeah. It wasn't that like, oh, I got 2 free beers because I just happened to be at this place. It's John Candy walked in and he ended up getting everyone to sing, like the Flintstones theme together, like as a group.
If we ever reach that level, JJ, let's make sure that we're more like John Candy and less like P. Diddy.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Right.
Also, in this book, they talk a lot about Bill Murray. And, we're coming to this point right now.
That's what I was thinking about.
We're really understanding how, like, Bill Murray is a difficult person in a lot of ways. It sounds like he's always been like that. It's not like he was super fun back in the day, and he was always been kind of moody. They talk about him, just being rude, and, like, the famous fist fight he had with Chevy Chase right before, a sketch on Saturday Night Live. And it sounds like he's always kind of been kind of a grumbly sort of dude.
Yeah.
A tragic artist in some way, maybe.
The older I get, the less and less I buy into that narrative of when someone's being an asshole, it's tragic for them, or it's necessary for their art when it just flat out isn't.
So I think you can have someone like John Candy who lost his dad died at 35.
Right.
And so John was a young man when his dad died.
Right.
And I think like you can say like, oh, well, he had some hardships in his life too. And he didn't turn out, so cynical and rude to like so many people.
This might sound like a weird comparison, or like I'm attributing non-famous people like us and everyone listening to this right now,
us normies,
as though we're pets, like dogs or cats. But there's some phrase out there that's like, a person shows you who they are when you see how they treat like someone that can do nothing for them.
Yes. Oh,
right?
100%.
And usually it's like how they treat a dog, right? That dog can't, help you pay your mortgage. They can't. There's very little a dog can actually do for you.
It goes back to, I tell this story all the time, which is when Larry the Cable Guy, like every time you tell the story, I love it. So I'm going to actually leave it to you. Would you talk about what happened at the Larry the Cable Guy show at the Fargo Theater?
And I'm trying to remember what year that would have been then. That would have been like 2004, maybe even earlier than that. I might have been in high school. I can't remember. I'll have to go. I was probably 17 or 18. I can't exactly remember. And I don't know how the hell this happened, but I got hired to do security at a Larry the Cable Guy double booking that night. So he did an evening or like an evening show and then a late show, and to 2 sold out houses, right? So this was in the heyday of Larry the Cable Guy was like probably the biggest touring act at that moment for stand-up comedy. He was doing he was doing theaters, but he was also doing stadiums, right? He was doing all sorts of stuff. And so, and really me and this other guy who was also not cut out for quote unquote security, our job was to just, if anyone tried to approach the front of the stage to get up and like, hey, go sit back down, right? That happened 0 times. They had a station, if you've ever been to the Fargo Theater, on either side where there's that curtain divide. I think really, if anything, it was to get people to not go through that curtain is really anything. But our job was to sit there in a chair and look out at the audience, right? So I basically sat and listened and kind of looked at Larry the Cable Guy do his act twice in a night, which was really fascinating to see. And he would mention me and the other guy from time to time because everyone could just see there are these two guys that are there, quote unquote, protecting Larry the Cable Guy. But then afterwards, both shows, he stuck around in the lobby and signed anything that anyone would ask him to, took as many photos as people asked, and did not leave until every fan who wanted something like that interaction, got that. So I got to be out there for that, and then I ended up getting my photo with him too. And I was really impressed about how he approached people. He was able to do it in a way where he was in character. Yeah, he was putting on a show still, but it still felt genuine, right? You didn't feel like you were being condescended to. And his fans, it was the highlight of their night. You could tell, right? You could tell that was the moment that really made it for them. And he didn't have to do that, right? He already had sold them tickets. He'd already probably gotten their merch dollars, right? And so he was doing something for them that they weren't paying him to do.
It's that level that anytime someone talks about like, well, it's just crappy Larry the Cable Guy, I will always say like, actually talk about a guy who appreciates his fans and the people, because it's so easy. Steve Martin is a guy who's famously private, right? Like he's talked in interviews too about how like the thing he likes the least about anything is having to like interact with fans because he just doesn't know how to do it, right? He's like, I just don't understand what to do and what to say. And so for Steve Martin, I understand that he doesn't want to go out and greet his hordes of fans. And, he did plenty of that in his early career. There's a famous story about how he performed at a university and there's like 4,000 people at this show, and afterwards he leads them across campus and finds an empty Olympic-sized swimming pool and makes all of them get into the swimming pool. And he doesn't have a microphone. He's like, everyone into the pool. And these people crawl into an Olympic swimming pool so that he can jump and crowd surf across the pool. And, or when Andy Kaufman did his famous bit where he takes everyone out for milk and cookies after the show.
Right.
And you're not guaranteed those things. You don't, and you shouldn't expect every show to be the show that goes down in history. But Larry the Cable Guy did that for an entire theater of people in Fargo, North Dakota. It's the same thing like when, all of a sudden I can't remember the comedian's name. Hot Pockets. Jim Gaffigan. When I met Jim Gaffigan before he was performing at the Civic Center, and I was at Barb's First in Deli having a piece of rhubarb pie, and he was there eating a sandwich by himself. And I was like, hey, listen, I'm going to your show tonight. Thanks for coming to Fargo. I know it must probably not be a great thing. And he gave me a piece of wisdom that I will forever hold, which is, when you can sell out a venue in Fargo, North Dakota, you really know you've made it. Anyone can sell out a venue in Chicago and New York, but this means that, I've connected with people. And I was like, I never really thought about it like that, but there's some real truth to that.
Yeah, totally.
The other thing that happened at this funeral that I could not stop thinking about and in a weird way has changed me as a human being, just this one moment. Right in front of me, there was a young couple, and they had a baby, and this baby is pretty new, not a newborn, but pretty new enough that like they would sit the baby up, but they'd have to hold the back of the baby, so that big expressive blue eyes, lots of smiling, barely made any noise, worked on its pacifier for a while, drank out of a bottle.
It didn't cough, did it?
Nope, no coughing. And the recessional was the entire church sang Lean on Me as they led the casket and the family out. And so, which is one of my, like that song, Lean on me when you're not strong. I just love that song.
JJ's doing the hands.
that baby stared at me and smiled the whole time. And I'm singing these lyrics and I look up and I'm watching this baby and this baby is just like staring at me. We're all standing. And so you might say like, well, he's holding the baby against his shoulder. So the baby didn't have anywhere else to look. It did. Like every now and then, like it kind of would look up, but then it came back to me. And there was something about watching the beginning of life, and it was probably the baby's first time it's ever taken in this song and taking it in with an entire room of people singing it, and they're crying and smiling at the same time while watching, you know, my friend's mom in the casket move down the aisle, and there was just something about that that really has stuck with me. And last night I had a dream about it, and in the dream this baby was telling me that I shouldn't be eating chicken wings. And so
shouldn't?
I shouldn't be eating chicken wings.
That was going to be a question early on in the episode, was when you think about your mortality then, because you've talked about this a lot, and I understand that anxiety. You're looking at when the people in your family, in your direct line, when they've passed away. So, you know, I don't believe that there is actually like a scythe waiting for you like that, just at that age per se. But I think you can point to like, look, these are people who really, you know, really gunned it, right? Like really just kind of did everything without thinking of actually taking care of themselves and their longevity. So then what do you consider? What steps do you think of when you go, oh God, I should be considering my longevity? What is it about your life right now that you want to change?
Well, I finally started taking my health a little more seriously. So I, you know, like I'm going to the doctor now instead of just avoiding that. Right. I have been an avid flosser for about the last 6 years, because you know what they say is heart disease creeps in through the gums. But I've started doing that, you know, like I've lost a certain amount of weight.
Yeah, you look good.
Especially
your calves. This dude's,
you like those calves, don't you?
They are kind of intimidating, and you can just see how much strength is in them.
I always think like this, because as you described, like I'm shaped kind of like a lollipop. Right?
A little bit.
You know, like I got these thin little legs.
Yeah.
And so I think it's because when I squat, they have to take all this weight, you know, that they're moving. So my legs are very great. But I've started to slow down. You know, luckily I don't have deep vices like smoking and drinking and, you know, some of those things that are pretty easy. I mean, food is something, but even like food I've dialed back on. Right. You know, like I'm not doing eating competitions anymore. And you know, like even something as simple as this, like I like eating seafood. Okay, here's an example. It used to be that if I bought a tub of cast clay French onion dip, it had maybe a 2-day shelf span in my
Not even for me.
Right?
That thing's gone.
I'm talking about the big tub too, right? You are too?
Yeah.
Well, now,
especially if the depression's kicking in real hard. Oh, absolutely.
And sometimes it won't make it to its expiration date, but I've noticed that like I've found myself more and more having to be like, I need to make sure to finish this before June 3rd, you know, when it's going to be out. So I don't know. I probably could be doing more, but again, I don't want that to become my identity either. You know, I yesterday the marathon went by my house and I watched people that inspired the hell out of me. Every year I watch this because there is somebody there who is in much different shapes than I am. And they completed a half marathon. They completed a full marathon. And you know what? They didn't set the pace. They didn't like come in first, but God damn it, they finished that marathon. And there's something about that inspires me to say like, yeah, listen, we could all be a little bit better. And, you know, we talked about the simple joys of just, you know, mowing my grass so that I can lay down in it and, you know, greet neighbors as they come by and stuff like that. I put a hammock in my backyard a few years ago. I love that thing, right? And I don't spend hours in it and I don't, you know, sip lemonade.
Right.
But when I do find 20 minutes to just get in that and like lay down, it's great. You know, today, before we even got to this recording, I spent time in my library and I picked up a book that I've been meaning to read called The New Librarian. the new librarian in town, and I've been meaning to get through this book, and I finally like got through the first like 4 chapters. And so I think it's less of like, oh gosh, my time is running out, but it's more of that idea that like, how can I make any time that I have more fruitful than it was before? You know, like I don't want someone to be like, you know what he was really good at was playing Frosty Fishdom on his phone and achieving a high score after he bought 20, rupees.
I think so much of that ties directly into the feeling we have when we feel anxiety of any kind, and how we are maladapted to dealing with it now, where we just try to do whatever it distracts us in the moment. I've been grappling with these exact same questions over the past couple of years, and especially the past couple of months. The other day, my mom gave me, just for my records, a copy of her like end of life wishes in case, any like resuscitate in this scenario, but not in that kind of a thing. And it was all, the answers were handwritten out by her. And it was her just instructions to us on what we will need to do when she dies. And I was just reading it in my car, in my driveway, and at first I wasn't realizing how much it was affecting me as I was reading it. And then I got to the second page, and she said something to the effect of that the song she wants played at her funeral is Standing Outside the Fire by Garth Brooks. And the moment I found out what the song is going to be that we're going to play at her funeral, I got dizzy because I realized what I was reading right now. I was learning something about the future that I was able to be, I don't know any of those answers. That's in the future. That's sometime, and now I know at least one fact about her funeral. And that made my mother's eventual death, right, as just a human being, really concrete for me. All of a sudden, it was like I got hit by this big, insert large thing here, right? I don't know. And so I have been thinking in terms of, am I using my time on this planet in a way that is wise or in a way that is foolish? Not, am I making, quote unquote, the most of my time? Because that is an immeasurable quantity that we can never even really know what that means, right? Well, I mean, how do you go back but you can at least have an idea of, did I spend my time wisely or did I spend it foolishly? And then you have to decide what falls under those definitions. And for me, defining spending my time wisely is the simplest change that I can do that affects all of it, I think, is to just slow down.
Yeah.
And just those two words is, if you're looking in your life for a way to try and lessen your suffering a bit, slow down. And just like when I eat food, like I've been eating these chocolate pretzels that you've put in front of me because I was like, oh my God, chocolate pretzels. And you've been kind enough to let me just raid this bag. I've just been like mowing them down, right? Like I always eat super fast. And so when I remind myself, hey, slow down, I get impatient with it. But I also find that I'm enjoying the food more, right? I'm enjoying my cheese and crackers a lot more versus just wolfing them down to get full.
Instant gratification is something that I think as human beings in the digital age want, right? What movie do you want to watch? It is instantly available. What song do you want to listen to? It's instantly available. Right. What do you want to eat right now? You can order it from almost any place in the globe. One of the things that has taught me the uttermost, patience in my life is canning pickles, right? Because you can the pickles and then you have to wait. You have to look at your hard work, just sit there and slowly sit in those jars and absorb that salt and absorb that vinegar. So from the time you can until the time they're ready is roughly 3 months. And that's a long time.
Yeah.
Especially as a little kid, learning that patience to, say okay, listen, good things come to those who wait, blah, 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 all those little pieces to it. One thing that I have started doing that is sort of my little 2024, I can be a better person. And when I say, did I leave the world a better place? It doesn't have to mean because I solved world hunger and I've done Gandhi-like things. Sometimes it's just did I today was today better because I was in it, right?
Right. Following
So-
the campsite rule?
Yes, right, exactly. Leave this place better than you found it. Yeah. So when I go to a place like Costco or the grocery store, if there is a rogue cart that someone hasn't put in the cart corral, I will put it in there. So like if it means that I got to step, 50 paces to get to this cart and bring it to the cart corral, I will do that. In the same thing of I've gotten to the point of where like I like to return my cart inside so it doesn't just sit outside as well too. And I know that the idea is that, well, there's someone there who does it. That's their job, is to move the carts back in. But think if everyone just did that a little bit, right? Like if you did that small thing, in the next episode, I'll talk about a big deck project I have, but part of that project was we found a nest of baby. Well, not we. My wife specifically found a nest of baby bunnies because our poodle George was at it, and like they were so little, like their little eyes weren't even open. I didn't notice it all when I was tearing apart this deck, and so outside in our backyard there is now a lean-to shelter that's been created with flaps on the side to provide protection for little tiny baby bunnies, and it's because my wife values the life of those bunnies in a way that shows that she has compassion for other things, right? It's not, I'm dominant, this is my backyard, get the hell out of here. It was all life matters. Right. And so that's one of the reasons why like I'll put up with Jill and all the things that she does that annoys me, because she really is a good person.
Well, but also that's actually a really good reason why you should regularly mow your lawn, because if the grass gets too high or gets too overgrown, then it becomes good cover for a bunny to make their nest in. That's happened to me a couple of times too, where I'll find a nest in a place that I need to mow, and which is obviously dangerous for the baby bunnies, and also you have to be able to mow at some point. So like every time before I mow now, I do a baby bunny nest check with a rake, where I just basically drag like a plastic like kind of weak rake with me and see if anything gets uncovered, because it can be really hard to see the pit that they've dug, but then they just cover that pit with loose grass and bunny hair, and that's actually what they're usually lining it with too. And so you basically want to like be able to pull that cover off to expose, so oh, they're right there. Then you can do whatever you need to do. The most recent time was last summer for me. I found a baby bunny nest, but it was actually too late. It had been gotten to by some kind of predator, and so there was only one baby bunny left. The others were kind of wherever, and I just hadn't even seen it before. And they had just opened their eyes, like that's where this bunny had gone. And so like I put it in a little box out there, and then later on it was gone, right? So either a predator got it, or one of the parents came back and got it, which could have been the case. But you got to be careful.
That's right. You don't want to destroy a bunny. That's the thing, right? Like what now? A wasp's nest, I understand, right? Like get that.
Those little shits.
Those are awful. But like these are cute.
I hit them with like the dirtiest chemicals. Like
you're right.
Oh, I'm gonna kill you and everything around you, right? I don't want you here.
I hope that you're not a multi-generation, because now I'm gonna destroy you. But we think of things like a tornado as like Mother Nature, but think about that. To a nest of baby bunnies, you are the tornado, right? Like you're this unstoppable force. Why are they choosing my home? I don't understand.
You were talking about patience. Actually, a really really good way if you want to like work on your patience as like a exercise. Poker is actually a pretty good game to do that with, because it's when you become impatient that you end up losing at poker. And you have people baiting you to do irrational things or not be patient, right? So it's actually a really good place to do that. But ever since I switched over to a dirted aquarium, that has really been like, now that I'm dealing with growing plants, it's really tough to not want to be like, oh, what else should I do to this, right? It's really I just have to let it sit now and let it continue to grow. And that has been driving me nuts.
Yeah.
And so I have to sit in front of the aquarium and then just kind of let that feeling recede. And half the time I give into it anyways. I rearrange plants in the thing or whatever. And so I now am trying to go, hey, you've done everything you need to. And the roots are really taking hold now. So just stop. The whole point of that was to set this up, stop, and just sit with it.
Should we do an experiment in patience right now? we'll stop talking and we'll see how long someone can wait before they hit the skip. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us continue to produce new episodes each week, visit jjmeetsworld.com, where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some swag at the merch shop, or follow our link to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the sites the cool kids are using these days. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by visiting moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, check out linebenders.com, where you can find direct contact info for JJ or booking information. Congratulations, listener. You made it to the end. You made the world a better place today.